In 1970, the case of beautiful single mother Loretta Jones, who was murdered and sexually assaulted, shocked the public opinion of Price City. The case fell into a deadlock due to the negligence and irresponsibility of the investigative agency at that time. It took 46 years after the murder, thanks to the tireless efforts of the victim's daughter, for justice to be served. Hello, welcome back to Unmasked. A 4-year-old girl stood in her living room, facing the camera and smiling shyly. This moment was captured forever by the camera. However, as the angle gradually widened, the photo that should have represented a happy and beautiful family made the viewer feel chills and fear. Because on the carpet in front of the girl was a large, dried blood stain. This living room was the crime scene where her mother was brutally murdered a few days earlier. This photo could have been taken by the police or a journalist when taking pictures of the scene. However, none of them realized that under the dried blood stain was hidden important information about the identity of the murderer left by the girl's mother. On July 30th, 1970, in Price City, Utah, USA, 4-year-old Heidi Jones suddenly woke up without seeing her mother beside her, like every day. She called her mother many times but did not see her mother respond. She immediately rubbed her eyes, climbed out of bed to look for her mother. As soon as she opened the door to the living room, a horrifying scene appeared before the eyes of the little girl Heidi. Her mother, Loretta Jones, was lying motionless in a pool of blood that had congealed on the carpet. Too terrified, the little girl ran outside to seek help from adults. "I think my mother is dead." Heidi's words to a neighbor next door made him feel quite confused, but he still stopped watering the plants to run to her house to see what was going on. The sight of Loretta Jones lying naked in a pool of blood with her eyes wide open haunted him for a long time afterwards. He quickly hugged Heidi and ran back to his house, then picked up the phone and called the police. The police arrived a few minutes later. They secured the scene and tried to collect the remaining evidence. The forensic test results confirmed that Loretta had died between 10 p.m. and 11 p.m. the night before. There were 17 stab wounds on the victim's body, mainly in the back, and a fairly deep cut in the neck area. It is possible that the deep cut in the neck area prevented the victim from screaming for help. Therefore, the neighbors did not hear any unusual noises during the night. In addition, there were no signs of illegal entry from the outside. The police determined that the perpetrator might have known the victim. What was special was that there was a fairly fresh amount of sperm in the victim's vagina. This proved that the victim had been sexually assaulted. However, it is not yet known whether the victim was raped before or after her death. In the 1970s, when DNA testing technology was still very primitive, such clues were worthless. Loretta, 23 years old, was a beautiful single mother who had lived here since Heidi was born. Neighbors commented that Loretta was a gentle and very friendly woman. She often asked about and was willing to help people around her if she could. On the contrary, neighbors also knew that being a single mother was not easy, so they helped Loretta a lot in taking care of her little daughter. Little Heidi grew up surrounded by everyone's love. In general, the relationship between them was very good. So this bloody case shocked the small neighborhood with more than 6,000 residents.
The sheriff kept calling my mother, and finally my dad comes home and he's very upset and in shock. First thing that my mother said is, "Where is Heidi?"
Although public opinion at that time was very interested, the police did not have any more important clues during the investigation. The case gradually became a deadlock, unable to find the culprit for many years after that. After Loretta passed away, Heidi was then moved to live with her grandmother. The haunting memory of her mother's death always haunted her mind. From childhood to adulthood, she had told her grandmother countless times that she had to find the evil enemy. However, every time, her grandmother advised her to let go and forget the haunting memory to live her own life. Heidi felt that her grandmother was a cold person, not caring about her mother's death at all. This small town was also a cold and cruel place. Therefore, when she grew up, she decided to leave her hometown without hesitation. In 1989, when Heidi was 23 years old, the same age as her mother when she passed away, she often experienced countless times waking up from nightmares, reliving the scene of that night. Her mother's death was forever a deep wound in her soul. If the evil enemy is not caught, this wound will never stop bleeding. With the explosion of television programs that explore mysteries and follow unsolved cases, Heidi sent a series of emails to the Price City Police, the state police, and even the FBI, asking them to reopen the investigation into her mother's murder. However, all of these letters received no response. 17 years later, in 2006, after many events in her life, Heidi was 40 years old. She no longer had the anger and determination she had when she was young. She felt tired and just wanted to return to her family to rest. Therefore, she decided to return to Price to live in her grandmother's house again. At that time, she did not expect that this decision would have a special importance in catching her mother's killer just a few years later. In June 2009, Heidi's car was stolen, causing her to be angry and write a post on social media to express her feelings. David, a childhood friend, posted a comforting comment below and said that the local police had made efforts to find the car. Surprisingly, David is now a detective with the Utah State Police. This is a rare opportunity not to be missed. Heidi immediately told David about her mother's murder and the pain she had suffered for nearly 40 years because the evil enemy was still free. David was impressed by Heidi's perseverance and was curious about this case. Under his efforts, the Utah State Police decided to reopen the investigation. However, the investigation almost failed from the beginning because all the files on Loretta's case, as well as the evidence collected from the scene, no longer existed. David did not give up easily. He tried to find the newspaper articles about the old murder case in the archives, but the information found was quite limited. He sadly informed Heidi of this bad news. Heidi said that she might have important information that the police had lost. After moving into her grandmother's old house, while cleaning up her grandmother's belongings, Heidi found an old box on the shelf in the storage room. Her mother's name was written on the outside of the box. Inside were newspaper articles and police reports about her mother's murder case, along with photos and other documents. Looking at these, Heidi was sure that her grandmother had spent a lot of time and effort compiling such detailed records. Heidi couldn't help but cry at that moment because her grandmother was not as cold-hearted as she had thought. Her mother's death had definitely hurt her, and her desire to catch the culprit was even stronger than Heidi's. However, perhaps her grandmother was aware of the danger and darkness behind the case, and in order to protect her granddaughter, she could only choose to remain silent and advise Heidi to forget it and live her own life. Fortunately, the documents she had arranged before her death had now become important clues to the investigation of the case. Heidi also found the only photo of the case, which was the photo she took a few days after standing next to her mother's blood. Not only that, from the newspaper clippings left by her grandmother, David learned that the police had actually arrested a suspicious man and charged him with murder. However, due to lack of evidence to sustain the charges, the court refused to prosecute, and the man was released. His name was Tom Agley. This name stirred memories in Heidi's mind. She remembered that shortly before her mother Loretta was murdered, she was introduced to her mother's boyfriend, Tom. However, after a few dates, Loretta realized that Tom was not a decent person. He was irritable, easily angered, and had many bad habits. He was absolutely not a good choice for marriage and not a good father for Heidi, so Loretta decided to break up. Tom was persistent. Heidi had witnessed Tom beating her mother, which frightened her at that time. Perhaps because of this fear, her brain had blocked many memories. But now, she had the courage to face the darkest parts of her memory. Heidi began to remember that on the night of the incident, her mother seemed to be waiting for someone. When her mother took her to the bedroom, her last words were, "Be good, lie down, no matter what happens, don't go out." Then, she heard her mother and a man talking. The man's voice became more and more fierce. He kept threatening to kill her mother. Because she was too young, Heidi probably didn't feel the danger approaching. After a long while, they stopped talking to each other. The space was filled with silence, and Heidi also fell asleep. These memories were not Heidi's imagination after she learned about Tom, because in her grandmother's bag there was a very old notebook recording what Heidi's grandmother asked her a few days after her mother's tragic case. The information recorded in it completely matched Heidi's current memories. However, it was clear that at that time the judge probably thought that the memories of a 4-year-old girl were not enough to be used as evidence in a murder case. So he dismissed Heidi's grandmother's accusation. Also, from the documents in her grandmother's box, David discovered a very important piece of information. On the same day Loretta was murdered. At around 9 p.m., a man attempted to kidnap Kulau Fennel, a 10-year-old girl who lived just a few blocks from Loretta's house, but failed. According to Kulau Fennel's testimony in the case file, it was a late summer afternoon, so she was riding a bike with her brother. At around 9 p.m., it was getting dark, and Kulau's brother was riding his bike very fast in front. She tried to chase after him, but at this time a man suddenly appeared from the side of the road. He blocked the bike, hugged Kulau, and tried to rape her. Too scared, the girl screamed loudly and fought back fiercely. Fortunately, when Kulau's brother turned around and did not see his sister, he turned his bike back to look for her. As he walked, he called out Kulau's name. This made the man worried. He was hesitating about what to do when Kulau suddenly struggled hard and escaped from the pervert's hands. She hurriedly ran towards the direction of her brother's call. The man then immediately left towards Loretta's house. Through Kulau's case, David realized that 2 serious crimes that happened so close together could be caused by the same person. Because he couldn't find much information about this failed kidnapping, David went directly to Kulau Fennel. The 10-year-old girl had now become a middle-aged woman. She clearly remembered seeing the face of the man who tried to kidnap her. The next day, she went to the police station to report the incident. In a stack of photos of the suspects, she pointed out Tom Egley. A few days later, Tom was summoned for investigation. The police at that time also linked it to Loretta's murder case. However, through interrogation and searching Tom's house, the police found no evidence related to the Loretta case. Tom was only sentenced to 90 days in jail for harassing Kulau. David continued to learn more information about the case from the adults in the neighborhood. He was provided with another very important piece of information. At that time, there was a rumor that before Loretta died, she used her blood to write the name of the killer on the living room carpet. Many people claimed to have witnessed the writing in blood, but did not know why the police did not handle this clue seriously. Fortunately, the only photo of the crime scene was kept in Heidi's grandmother's old document box. Using graphic techniques in 2009, David actually identified 2 scribbled characters in the bloodstains on the carpet. Those 2 characters were T and O. At this time in David's mind, Tom became the #1 suspect in Loretta's case. However, All the clues were only circumstantial evidence and not enough to convict Tom. While David was at a loss for what to do next to bring the murderer to light, he suddenly saw a small note in the forensic test report that year. The victim was sexually assaulted before or after death. This meant that the murderer had left traces on the victim's body through semen. This was the most important clue of the murder case that had been overlooked due to the technology at that time being too backward. Thus, a DNA test could clearly determine whether Tom was the murderer or not. David determined that the only chance to solve this case was to exhume Loretta's grave to collect DNA samples. David also told Heidi about this, and she fully supported him. Being a veteran detective, before proceeding with the exhumation, David contacted his colleagues in the forensic department to anticipate the worst possible situations that could happen when collecting DNA. Because the case happened many years ago, the results may not be as they expected. Faced with these undesirable possibilities, David and the investigation team came up with a bold idea. That is, they relied on the media to widely report on the reinvestigation of Heidi's mother's murder. All the details and clues of the case were announced. The investigation agency was very excited about the results achieved. Finding the murderer was only a matter of time. Information about the reinvestigation of the young girl Loretta received a lot of attention from the city's community. Because this was one of the cases that had shocked this peaceful small city for a long time. People talked about the details of the case everywhere. Even the identity of the suspect, with the two letters T and O, was rumored to the extreme. Of course, this information also went to where it needed to go, which was Tom Egley. Although the exhumation of Loretta's grave did not yield as much information as the police expected, because Loretta's grave was too heavily invaded by water. However, the investigation agency still announced a shocking piece of information. That is, the police have determined that the perpetrator of the case is still alive and is currently preparing to arrest him. After this news was announced, a woman called claiming to be Tom's current neighbor. She provided important information. Tom came to her door and asked her to help take care of his dog and said that the police might be coming to arrest him soon. Because Tom is now a 76-year-old man, this may be the last time Tom will see his dog. The police assess that Tom is currently no longer capable of threatening the safety of others, and they also determined that Tom's current mentality is very insecure and easily agitated, so they asked Tom's neighbor to continue to meet, talk to Tom, and convince him to confess to put his mind at ease. As the police expected, Tom quickly confessed that he was the one who murdered Loretta 49 years ago. At the Price City Police Station, Tom gave the following account of the entire crime. On the night of the crime, he got drunk and went to Loretta's house to relieve his sexual desire. On the way to Loretta's house, he saw little Kulau Fennel riding her bike alone. A dark thought came to his mind. He thought that Loretta might reject him, so he had the intention of raping the little girl. However, the incident failed, causing all of Tom's desires to be directed towards Loretta. He decided to have sex with her at all costs. When he arrived at Loretta's house, Tom tried his best to keep her from breaking up with him, but Loretta refused all his wishes. Knowing that he could do nothing more, Tom asked to have sex with Loretta one last time. He thought she would comply with his last wish. But no, Loretta firmly refused. Tom repeatedly threatened to kill her if she broke up with him. In response, Loretta firmly refused. In a fit of anger because he could not achieve his goal and thought he had been betrayed, Tom used a small knife in his pocket to stab the victim in the neck. Blood gushed out continuously. Loretta held her neck and collapsed. Not stopping there, Tom continued to have sex with the victim while Loretta was unable to resist. It seemed that the victim's pain made him even more excited, so during sex, Tom stabbed the victim dozens of times in the back. After having sex, he quickly left and thought Loretta was dead. The wounds caused by a small knife did not cause the victim to die immediately. The victim died from losing too much blood in the last breaths of her life. Loretta still tried to use her blood to write the name of the murderer on the carpet, but she only had time to write the letters T and O. With his brutal murder, Tom was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 20 years without parole. This is no different from a death sentence for the perpetrator, who was 76 years old. Thus, the mysterious case of Loretta that haunted this small town for nearly 50 years has finally ended. With Heidi's relentless determination, everything has been cleared up. It's just a pity that the perpetrator was punished too late. Today's case ends here. Thank you for your attention, goodbye, and see you again in the next videos.